Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your previous introduction there with your topic as well, Glenn. And good afternoon from sunny Wukov in the east of Poland this afternoon. I'm just going to share the screen with you so I can show you the presentation. And as Glenn said, I've been thinking about some ideas really to get students involved in class during the current times. Okay, and an overline of my presentation this afternoon, which I hope is going to, it's going to work. As I said, getting all students involved, connected to what Glenn was saying before, the no sharing of stationery, the issues that may occur from social distancing and interacting in class, some elements of perhaps virtual interaction that we could use instead of standard techniques, book pacing, games, and then an overview at the end. So one of our get to or go to techniques quite often for getting students involved in class is throwing a ball around in the class, which of course during COVID could pose hygiene challenges perhaps. So to randomly get students involved, I've seen techniques used in the past where a teacher has lollipop sticks in a pot, randomly pulls a lolly stick out with a name on, so maybe a pot for each class, which would randomly involve students in the lesson. Another way of involving students could be having numbers assigned to each student using a random number generator on the internet, just to make sure that all students are involved in the class, whether those numbers are allocated at each lesson, or perhaps we laminate some numbers on the tables, for example, that the students are using. If we don't fancy using any of those methods, then perhaps virtually throwing a ball, which I think Sandy mentioned in her presentation just now, making sure, of course, that our body language is open. I think a risk of virtually throwing a ball, we could end up pointing at students and making sure our body language is open rather than perhaps pointing at someone, but ways to get people involved in all the lessons. Also, Cahoot is often used in the language classroom here in the east of Poland. Sometimes students don't have their own phones, or they don't have internet access. And if we were to give them access to our school internet, we would soon have either students using the internet in the lessons for other purposes, or the school internet perhaps crashing. So we're thinking perhaps of issuing students with a set of cards at the beginning of the year that each student maybe has their own card. Red and green cards for yes and no, or A, B, C, D cards for like a multiple choice activity, which means that students sat at their desks without moving around the class can actually have some kind of interaction without moving around the room. So that's an idea that we're going, I think, to pilot this year, sort of a manual version perhaps of Cahoot. Of course, as Glenn mentioned in his presentation, sharing stationery is an issue, and quite often we would invite students up to write on the whiteboard. Something we're considering doing here in our school this year is issuing each student with their own whiteboard marker, which hopefully they won't lose, but that would then allow them to potentially write on the whiteboard. If, of course, they were to lose their whiteboard marker, they would have to buy another one and make sure that it's not permanent. But if a permanent marker is used, it doesn't tend to be the end of the world. A simple nail polish remover or a dry wipe marker writing over what they've written normally actually uses the correct solvent there to allow you to get permanent marker off of the board. Of course, in addition to the standard whiteboard, mini whiteboards might be used, a laminated sheet of A4 or A3 paper, which we're also considering issuing to our students at the beginning of the year, or blank paper so that students can show their answers to other members of the group whilst remaining socially distanced. Also, something which may take place, of course, with the social distancing, interacting in the class may be difficult. If students are 1.5 meters or 2 meters apart, they may be inclined to speak more loudly. So we may need to adapt the approach we use to speaking in class. Perhaps instead of a two-way conversation, from time to time we could use response cards, so connected with those cards that I mentioned before, or writing down answers on paper to show the other students could be used. or we may need to encourage shorter answers or shorter prompts than usual, just to keep the noise level down and to make sure that both people in the pair can perhaps hear each other. Another method that we may use is when someone is speaking, the other student takes some notes and reports back. And that's also something teachers may use for monitoring the students and giving feedback, taking notes and giving a group feedback, so they are keeping a social distance from the students. I also teach a lot of very young learners. 2.5 is the youngest that I teach, and lots of reinforcement and praise, of course, is needed with this age group. Quite often with our young learners, we use stickers. Perhaps a self-inking stamp could be used instead of stickers, so that we're not actually touching any of the paper that our students are using. Reward charts on the wall as well, where the stickers could maybe stuck instead of giving them to the students, would give a visual reinforcement to good behavior. As I think it was Glenn mentioned before, the kindergarten lessons often have a set pattern every lesson. And one thing I found when I went back into teaching kindergarten lessons is that the contact that I had with each young learner at the beginning of the lesson, a high five, actually had to turn into a virtual high five. And I think giving a high five from a distance, having that eye contact with the young student is a good way to involve them in the lesson, and so they have that at least that slight individual contact with the teacher. I'm a father of 3 young children myself, and one thing that was mentioned in the back-to-school meeting in the state school here was, should kids, or the kids probably will have bad behavior marks for shaking hands, sharing pens, etc. And it'll be interesting to see how students' behavior perhaps changes, because shaking hands in Poland is very much embedded in the day-to-day behavior. So should we give bad marks for sharing stationery, shaking hands accidentally? That's something that perhaps we need to explore as the months or the weeks go ahead before the school year starts here. Having been involved very much in the placement testing of our students this year, one thing that I've noticed is that students seem to have slightly more gaps in their knowledge, let's say, than perhaps previous years, mainly because the online lessons at school gave some of them a bit of a break, I think, from English. And we've noticed that we've got quite a lot of students coming to us this year that hadn't been to private lessons before. So my feeling is that maybe at the beginning of the year, students may need a bit more revision of previous material than in previous years, which is something I think to bear in mind. Another thing which I always tell my teachers here at the beginning of the year is make sure that you know the textbook better than the students do. Quite often in the textbooks that we use, there's grammar explained in Polish, there's stuff at the back of the book, so it's really, really important to make sure that you know the book better than the students do, and all the extra features that can be used in the lessons as well. Some games, perhaps some socially distanced games and things which would allow interaction in the class without us having to move around too much. Don't pass the parcel is one that I found recently, where instead of passing a physical parcel around the classroom, we encourage the students to clap, and a clap actually goes around the classroom, which involves all the students. When the music stops, we ask the students a question, for example. In my kindergarten class at the moment, how old are you? So that's something which could involve the students, creates a bit of an atmosphere, for example, and will keep the students involved and keep things fun and have some action. Last one standing, where we ask a question, and when it's correct for someone, we sit down, for example, just a minute, so encouraging students to speak for a minute. 21 Pictionary shopping list, where, for example, one person says something, the next person has to repeat it and add an idea to it. But these are all games, perhaps, that we should have in our repertoire, so that if we do find ourselves finishing a lesson slightly too quickly, there's always a backup idea that isn't Hangman, and that's why I put the image there of Hangman, because I think Hangman can very easily be overused. So having a variety of games in the armory is something which I would certainly recommend, especially for perhaps newer teachers. Finally, I think it's really, really important we reflect on what works and doesn't work in this new environment. One thing I think we've all noticed is the COVID world can change very quickly, and it's better to be prepared, ready for anything, rather than to be unprepared. And revising Zoom skills, making sure we're ready to go online is something to keep fresh and make sure we're on the ball. And I think that's exactly 10 minutes. So thank you very much for listening.